Mr. Tavares, CEO of Stellantis, I have a modest proposal for you regarding Frank Rhodes and his request to be able to explore purchasing some brands from the former Chrysler Corporation from Stellantis. Now, Mr. Rhodes is the great-grandson of Walter P. Chrysler, and he is passionate about that company and his family's legacy and making sure that it continues for the next 100 years. I did a whole video about it and why I thought there wasn't much chance of it and some of the hurdles that would have to be overcome. I recorded that before you issued your response. It's very telling that he wrote you a personal letter and Stellantis replied with press releases to news organizations. But I'm asking you to reconsider it because I believe there is a path forward that is a win-win for you, for Chrysler, for the workers, for America, and for the customer as well. Now, when Stellantis was formed with the merger with Fiat Chrysler, you declared that all of the brands had 10 years basically to find their footing. And I have stood by you through this, saying that you needed time to come out with the next generation platforms, to tailor them and make them ready for the American market. I have been eagerly awaiting Peugeots to come here to America as Chryslers. But it's been 3.5 years. And while you've filtered out a couple of concept cars along the way, the fact is that Chrysler's lineup has shrunk from 2 to 1 vehicle, which is a minivan now that the 300 has been canceled. Dodge also continues to have models cut, while Jeep is doing okay and Ram is doing okay, except for the falling sales and the falling profitability of your company, which inspired you after the last quarter's results to come out and say that any brand that's not profitable could be on the chopping block. So it's your words that actually brought this thought about and actually brought this movement to bring Chrysler and Dodge back to America. Now, of course, your response to Mr. Rhodes was that you have a 10-year plan. They have 10 years to prove themselves and that these brands are integral to your long-term vision for a future. And I understand that. But so far in that 3.5 years, it doesn't really appear that, well, either one of these brands are getting a lot of attention. Sure, Dodge gets some exciting models along the way, and there can be a lot of hype around them, but there's been no painting 1/3 now of the way into your 10 years to paint a long-term picture of what is coming for these two brands, what platforms, what powertrains, what assembly, and what models. Chrysler deserves a full lineup, and they have 1. Dodge deserves a full lineup, and they have 2. So with these two brands currently being, I don't want to say neglected, why not consider spinning them off? You would obviously, I believe, want to keep the Jeep and the Ram brands as a very profit center area here in America, allowing you to keep a foothold in America. But I propose that you spin off Chrysler and Dodge along with the Plymouth, DeSoto, Imperial, and Fargo names into a new Chrysler. Now, obviously, you want to be compensated for this, but the benefits are many to everyone. Part 1 of my plan would be keep partial ownership. I would personally propose somewhere around 10% that allows you to spin it off as an independent American-owned company, but keep the financial benefits of their future success. In addition, you would be the technological partner and advisor for this new company. They would need frames, powertrains, motors, batteries, hybrid systems, and everything else moving forward, and you could retain that and work with the company, benefiting both parties on each side of the Atlantic. Obviously, as part of this, the new Chrysler would need, a few factories or 2 and a headquarters so they aren't based out of a strip mall, but all of that is absolutely surmountable. The question after that becomes, well, where does the rest of the money for the other 90% come from? Well, as Mr. Rhodes recommended, bringing the workers in would be a key part of this, tying them and their long-term future to the company itself. I know this is common in France and Germany, for example, and while it would have resistance here in America, I am not opposed at all to the union stepping up and owning 10, 15% and a board seat. You would have a board seat, the union would have a board seat, and your interests would align. And now we're about 20%. I would recommend at this point that BYD be brought in, the Chinese electric vehicle manufacturer. While you have warned about the coming Chinese invasion, and certainly there's plenty of scuttlebutt on the internet about whether BYD is as good as Tesla or a fire hazard, the fact is they are expanding worldwide, and they are going to want a foothold in America. And whether our politicians fight back against it or not, it's only a matter of time until they come here. So why not help control the narrative? Bringing BYD in as an equity investor for, let's say, another 10%, possibly a board seat, also brings their technical expertise into the equation, into this alliance, and gives them a foothold in America and the American market and American tastes. I think this would be easy to sell to them and that they would have the equity to bring in. But right now we're still at about only 30%. Even if each of these three parties takes an extra 5%, we're only talking about 45%. This majority of the company is still left in the air. As I said in my previous video, I'm not sure that Mr. Rhodes has a few $1 billion laying around, and there's going to need to be capital funding this venture, moving to new dealerships, for example, new distribution, and developing those future generations of models for them. And that's why I propose Warren Buffett. He's been in the news recently for taking more cash out of the equities market, which, from what I've read, is pretty much in line with the cash stake he normally keeps. But we're talking about him having somewhere in the neighborhood of $180 to $220 billion cash on hand. Now, as an outsider, I can't say what you would want for a few factories, headquarters, 2 brands, and your technological alliance, but we can assume it's going to be in the billions. And he has the cash for that to bring to the table. He already has experience with automotive because he did have a large position in BYD, which he has reduced down to 5%. He has something like 50 million shares of General Motors. He has experience in the automotive industry and is an American money, bringing American jobs to America. He's the perfect equity investor in this to keep it American. And there you have a framework for how all the different interests could be aligned with each other and working forward. Now, as I've said in my other video, I don't know that Frank Rhodes and his passion for Chrysler, Plymouth, and Dodge really makes him equipped to be the CEO of a new automotive company. I'm sure from what I've heard, he's a fine man, but I do believe there would need to be some executive leadership brought in, and I've tossed that question about for a little while. My first thought was honestly Bob Lutz. He is the man, and he should be the one who took over Chrysler after Lee Iacocca. However, he is 92 years old, and while I don't know him personally, I think that maybe his age and just not wanting to put up with the hassle of it would play a part. I also thought about Mark Fields. I think he would be an excellent choice, but ultimately I've settled on Alan Mulally. He was CEO of Boeing. He took over Ford. He led them successfully. And while he is 79 years old, as I recall, well, if we can elect a president that age, surely he can run an automotive manufacturer for 5 years. So that's my modest proposal to you. Please don't let Chrysler die. Please do not let Dodge fade away. Let these have a chance to build again, once again, to rescue themselves and build American vehicles that we can all be proud of. I like Chrysler. I like their history, even if it was 100 years ago. I'm proud of them, and I don't want to see them fade away. So I encourage you, give this a chance. Thanks for listening.